Hi Libra, this is Lee at Fresh Astrology. How are you doing? We are doing quarterly forecasts, and so right now we're looking at the rest of October, which I realize is almost over, but it will explain a lot about how October has been and where it's going, and a lot of this energy that's here in October is also playing into November, and it even gets more intense in certain ways, but intense, remember, doesn't mean negative. A lot of people will get triggered by certain words, and I can't really help that, but I do try to balance what I'm saying so that if you do get triggered by words, that you can back off a little and watch yourself react rather than thinking I'm telling you that something bad is going to happen. So intensity doesn't mean a negative thing. If you feel like, if I say the word intense, because I am going to use that word here, just notice that you react to that word, and think about why that may be. Are you worried about intensity? What does it mean to you if I say the word intense? So that's just a little side note for people who get triggered by language, and just notice when that happens. Notice that you might make something you hear in this forum mean something bad, and when you're listening to other astrologers, psychics, whatever, tarot readers, I mean, sometimes people do say, something bad's going to happen to you. I would tend to why? Why do you want to know that? Why do you want to have somebody tell you that? What if it's not true and you just live with that horrible feeling? But I never say something bad's going to happen to you, but I will say something might get more intense, or you might need to take care of your health. These are just like realities of life. Taking care of your health is something we should all do. And intensity, because of Scorpio season, that's what's starting to happen as we move into November. So we take the energy from October, it intensifies. But if a lot of good stuff's happening in your world, it intensifies. If you, for example, you started a romance, it intensifies. You started a job you love, it intensifies. You love it even more. The romance, you fall in love quickly in some cases, not all, but for some of you. There's a lot of romantic stuff going on for some of you. There's even this idea of someone coming in from the past. So you may find, some of you, that this love interest comes in from the past. So when we talk about Scorpio season, things intensifying, think of it like good stuff could be just getting more rich with the goodness, or whatever. Sometimes work can intensify, but that's not a bad thing. I have some intense work projects that I work on, but I love them. I'm glad I've got them. So think about how you get triggered by words, if you do. And for those of you who are watching other signs as well, think, notice yourself, not what I'm saying. If you start having a weird reaction to what I'm saying, notice what's happening inside of you, and notice what you're reacting to. Because I'm here to tell you, I'd never tell you something bad is going to happen to you, but what's weird to me, but as a coach, I also see this happen a lot, is people they kind of hear one thing, it goes through their brain, and then they've got this whole story around it that's totally different from what was said. If what was said was kind of neutral. So just notice yourself. I do this all the time in my own self-work. I have to notice what I make things mean when I hear something neutral. And it's good, kind of a coaching tool and some advice for all of you. So let's talk about November, the tail end of October, November, and then we'll move into December later in the reading. So the main thing to think about is if you want to think of symbolism, think about the symbolism going on with Venus retrograde, which is your patron planet, and Uranus retrograde. They are in opposition to one another. We also have the Sun in opposition through part of this time, so that intensifies this dynamic. Opposition is another word that can trigger people. I even have to do some work around the word opposition. Sometimes I think, people are being like fighting if you're in opposition to, but it also means across from, and in relationship with, tight relationship with, and across from. So you can think of it in life like you're across the table from somebody or a group of people, and there you are in this dynamic, this relationship where you're kind of brought together, kind of looking at each other. And it's also like you're looking in your own mirror and learning about you through this person. And maybe several people right now are kind of teaching you more about yourself. And there's potential they're learning about themselves through you. But there's definitely this interesting, tight, and kind of intense dynamic between two people. And again, this can represent not just one person in your life who comes across your field or across the stage in your life, but several people. There could be some interesting dynamics going on. And interesting is not meant to be like covering up for something negative. Interesting means interesting. It'll be fascinating. You'll learn so much. And again, I'm not being tongue-in-cheek to cover up something bad. So in opposition to can also mean in tight relationship with. So that's the dynamic. And what's kind of doubly, triply, quadruply interesting about this opposition with Venus and the Sun with Uranus is that we've got both those planets in retrograde at the same time, and that the fact that they're both straddling two zodiac signs, and when we look at sort of a generic chart, not only are these planets straddling each one is straddling two different signs, but each one is also straddling two different houses. So we have 4 zodiac signs implicated with all their symbolism and energy that they infuse into the planetary motion, and the planets are infusing these signs. And there's a two-way street there. But also we've got 4 areas of the chart, and those areas are called houses. So 4 houses, 4 stages of life, 4 areas of life implicated with all that symbolism. And all that, the planetary energy kind of feeding into that, and vice versa. So, Libra, you are kind of giving up the Sun. By the time I give this, you've had the Sun in your sign, so generally speaking, that energizes a person. So you've had better energy. Maybe there's been a spotlight on you in some way. People have been focused on you. But it tends to feel, especially after the previous months where you may have been lower energy, it may feel good to have this extra energy. You also have been hosting Mars in your 5th house, which is very energizing as well. It's in trine relationship to you personally. And the 5th house is an area of romance. So here we have that romantic quality, and can definitely show like energy going into having fun, trying to have fun. And possibly that includes romance. It can also include creative projects or big projects that you're working on that you love, that you feel passionate about. So it can show that as well. You also have, let's go up here, Juno kind of going back and forth over this 8th house cusp. So this is another indicator on the chart that's hanging out between 2 zodiac signs and 2 houses. So when you have all of this going on, the cusps that I'm talking about, when a planet's hanging out between 2 things, it's on a cusp. And when you have a lot of things hanging out on a cusp, like the North Node, the South Node, Juno, all these other planets, Chiron, we've got all these things, Jupiter's hanging out on a cusp. we're entering a time of huge change. And so these are all doorways open, and there's this pause. It's like everything's poised and paused before big change sweeps in. So in your life, where we tend to see this, I mean, it's because there's so many things hanging out on doorways of life. When you are hanging out on a threshold, think of the term threshold. We use that term to symbolize, you're on the threshold of something new. It also symbolizes leaving something behind. There's so many thresholds open and ready to change. There's a lot in your life that's changing. A lot in each one of our lives is changing. So it's a time of big change. But if we stick more tightly just to this dynamic between Uranus and Venus, we've got jobs, money, earning, spending, beautifying, thinking about how to buy art or beautify things. There's a lot here about personal values, noticing your values, maybe really noticing the values of other people, seeing the differences in some cases, and you will be more intensely focused on something to do with work. So a lot of you may be focused on a new job, or if you own a company, on that, but a lot of you are focused on money. Money is a big topic for you right now. So, it could be there could be any number of things going on for different Libras, but it can indicate new jobs, negotiations around salary, getting a promotion, if you have your own company, which there is some energy in the Libra chart for some of you having your own company. There's a big push and focus on finances. And a lot of you should be earning, you're poised to, remember we're kind of at thresholds here. So even if you don't feel like you are earning a lot more money, you're poised to earn more money. You're on the threshold to have more money come in. But for some of you, it may feel like you're just spending, and the money's just flying out the door. Some of you are spending on legal issues because of, we have Venus and Jupiter here. And we have Jupiter moving in November into the third house, which can indicate legal issues as well, contracts. But it also symbolizes, there's some school symbolism here, learning, teaching, legal, writing, communications. If any of you want a legal job or communications, that is well starred here. And we also have Juno. We're getting away from this tight opposition for a second, but Juno is kind of going back and forth between an area of the 8th house, money, higher finances, and also Juno in the 9th house shows marital issues sometimes. If you specialize in something to do with women, it can, say more about that. We can't go down each person's individual track too far, or we don't address all of you. But some of you may have some kind of magazine or publication or job or legal job around women. Women, it may be a specialty, or family law. So some of you, it may be that your job has something to do with family stuff in marriage or women. Some of you, it could show something about your personal life, because we do have Chiron hanging out on the descendant line, and then Uranus, which we haven't fully addressed, is hanging out over in this area to do with marriage, close relationships, and it's right on the cusp of the 7th and 8th house, really the cusp of the 8th. And if there are troubling marital issues, you'll see sometimes a rupture or a break with Uranus here, especially with Chiron there on the descendant. Now, if you're in a beautiful relationship with no problem whatsoever, this could show something entirely different. It could show the flip side of that, where you're healing an old wound by getting into a new relationship that's very intense or something like that. So it just depends on where a person is and what's been going on before. Because there'll be plenty of Libras who are happily married and nothing bad's going to happen. But there are some changes. Maybe in some cases there are going to be changes with your partner. Your partner may have some problems or upset or just changes, financial changes. Or so some people may, if you do have a partner, it could be a business partner or a love partner, they may have some big financial ups and downs going on. And the two of you, and because you're partnered, the two of you may have some ups and downs going on. So these could have been, in some cases it's up. It's an upswing where, a big increase occurs. Because with Uranus, you never know. So I expect it's a wild swinging back and forth. So some Libras, there's like a big infusion of money, maybe through an inheritance or stocks or tax changes. If you are getting married, it changes your tax situation. When you get divorced, it changes your tax situation. So those larger financial issues with debt, with taxes, all the big stuff, those bigger institutions that kind of infiltrate and sometimes, rain on your money parade sometimes, but sometimes they can bring in more money. You can turn your tax situation around and have more coming in. You can turn your financial situation around with good investments or long-term investments. You may suddenly see a big increase. But just as likely, some of you have a partner situation or a job situation where maybe they're having some struggles, but it does impact you because of that. So what can you, when I tell somebody something like that, where there's this other person out there, this other entity impacting your finances, what can you do about that? What can you do? I never think you're just a victim. I mean, people can come in and impact your life, for sure. And we can't control them, but we can control how we react to the situation, how we react to them, what we decide to do once we realize something's happening. So if someone else is disrupting your financial world, you do have some control here. You would be figuring out, in that instance, you would be figuring out how to take control of your own finances, how to separate yours from theirs, how to take some money and do something else with it, preserve what you can. When you see Uranus, you definitely want to use electronics. So, if you're still sending out paper checks, this is the time to stop and use technology to benefit you. Use technological enhancements to help you manage your money, automatic withdrawals, stuff like that. Maybe have your taxes, do the most streamlined version of everything, and have others helping you, especially technological apps or functions that can help you deal with your finances. And you want to separate and have independence. Uranus can suggest independence. You want to have some independence financially. So do what you can, whether you're invested in a company or really tightly bound up with someone else's finances, to be somewhat independent where you can. So that would be my best advice there. And if you're single and it's hard to resonate with this, you still want to pick up on, and hopefully your understanding with this, you interpret it based on your situation. Just because you're single doesn't mean you don't have to pay attention to this, because this is absolutely relevant for you. You want to be thinking about, because Uranus is still impacting your 8th house. So if you're single, it puts more of a burden on you, really, to figure this out and to be independent feeling around your money. So the onus, or and burden here is another word I use that is not meant to be pejorative. It means that I guess I could say you're even more responsible if you're not bound up with anybody else, even another company. If you're your own kind of solopreneur and there's no one else, this puts more of a responsibility on your shoulders, as it should. And we all do, I think, especially women, but men too, we all need to be taking, but I'm speaking to women right now, more responsibility for our finances and figuring it out. There's no excuse not to. You can learn anything online. There's so many tools we can use. It's the best time in history for women to get out there and get help and invest and really take control of their own finances. We've come so far, and if you're young, you may not remember that even in the 80s there were some restrictions around women having credit and getting loans, and now that's not true. Now we're so much freer and so much more is available to us to do financially for ourselves. So recognize this is a gift, because throughout history it's been much harder for women to have this kind of independence over their own finances. So this is a good time to really step out and take control and kind of celebrate that you can. No matter what's going on, even if there's been a little of a setback, celebrate the fact that you can disentangle your finances if you need to. You're allowed to legally, at least in most Western countries. You're allowed now, and this even 30, 40 years ago, which isn't that long ago, within my lifetime, even as an early, young adult, women had very, not as much freedom, very different set of rules. And celebrate that you have this ability to master your own finance world. So likewise with relationships, celebrate the ability to disentangle if you need to. Celebrate your independence. I would caution you not to rush into a relationship right now, but to, what's the right word? Explore. It's a great time to explore relationships, whether it's a long-term relationship. You can explore new territory. You can, we talked about intensity. You can dive a little deeper and try to get a little more vulnerable and learn how to explore an even deeper form of intimacy. And intimacy is not just about physical intimacy. It's about really kind of pulling back the curtain over and over again to reveal more of yourself and to feel really safe doing that. So if you're in a relationship, you can explore that. If you're single, newly single, or you've been single, it's good to, you're on kind of this new frontier where you're exploring relationships afresh. And, every time you go into a new relationship, it's some brand new territory. And you can learn about yourself and explore this frontier. So it's not just about the other person and exploring them, but really exploring what it's like for you and learning about yourself when you're in relationship with someone else. And this is at work or in love. You are on a frontier of sorts, and it's going to feel like that for 7 years. Uranus can feel, if at first, and sometimes it can feel disruptive, and the trick with Uranus is to learn how to get a little bit ahead of it and work with your own ability to cope with change and surprising news. When we start with Uranus, we start to get very good wherever it is. At first it'll feel kind of disruptive and maybe even challenging, depending on how it's impacting your life. And then after a while, and this is just what everyone goes through, so this is the human experience. After a while, we just get so much better at understanding whatever it's trying to tell us in a certain area. So, but it's always pushing all of us to feel whole within ourselves by forcing us, in many cases, to become more and more independent. but still connected to the whole, not independent and cut off from and isolated, but a strength and a depth within us, especially where, we're talking about, the eighth house and also Scorpio across the way. There's this going deeper into ourselves, finding our center, feeling our gravity, getting our feet under us, kind of grounding, especially with Taurus kind of playing off the Uranus energy. There's a sense of grounding and going deeper with Scorpio, and growing as a result of whatever is getting disrupted. So in some cases the disruption comes from winning the lottery or getting married and suddenly your income doubles, or a big inheritance comes in, and that's, even though money's pouring in, it can feel disruptive because maybe someone died, which is sad and disruptive. Or winning the lottery, people, when they go back and do studies on the people who win the lottery, it's highly disruptive. It can totally disrupt their world. They can get divorced, lose friends, but they've got tons of money, right? So it's, how do we react to what's happening around us and in our own world? How do we take control in a way that isn't trying to control others, but controlling us and what we can manage ourselves? How do we do that balance? But still feeling connected to others, because this eighth house thing is meant to bring, Librans into this idea of exploring, getting closer in a true intimacy, which again is not, you can be intimate with someone that's not even a romantic partner. You can reveal more of yourself to yourself and others, to explore that, while at the same time feeling strong within yourself, that kind of independence, but not cut off from or isolated. Does that make sense? What else can we say here? Let's look at December, because what I've been talking about is most of October, November. So when we get into December, what really changes in a big way is that, Jupiter in November will have moved into Sagittarius, but when Jupiter moves in somewhere, it zooms in really fast. And so it's firmly into Sagittarius. Like in a very short amount of time, it's like already finished with the first decan. That's the first third of going through Sagittarius. That's a lot of fast movement. And so whatever's happening in the area of the third house in your case happens very quickly. So if we were talking about court case, legal action, if we're talking about publication, if we're talking about if you have, it could be a legal job or a writing communications job, it happens very quickly. This is also an area of your siblings. Stuff could be going on very quickly there, an expanded relationship with, expanded stuff going on with your siblings, changes maybe, maybe more exposure to your siblings, talking to them more. It also shows change in neighborhood and kind of your community. So meeting your neighbors, getting out, meeting new people. There's this meeting new people cycle that you're going to go through. So it expands your world to some degree, but it may have to do with a move. You do have and have had Saturn and Pluto in your fourth house for a while, so your home situation, you could have multiple properties, you could have one property, you could just be renting, but there's something shaking up here where, or maybe you've lived in the same place for a while, but suddenly you're getting out and you're meeting more of your neighbors. But there's this very communicative, getting out, meeting others kind of feeling here. So it's very upbeat, because Jupiter is going into its favorite sign of Sagittarius. So it's this very outgoing energy. So you're really learning to connect with others in a new way, and maybe a lot of new people. And there's also something here about a job. So I think a lot of you are There's some changes, maybe getting a job, maybe just changes at work, something new people around you, but it's more significant. It's not just a little thing. What else? Some of you are getting more serious with somebody. For a few people, there's this issue of an affair. It's more likely to be you, but that's not all Libra. So if your spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend is a Libra, don't think they're all having affairs. Rather than think that and get judgmental, why don't you work on getting closer with them, because this is a time when they really will crave more intimacy. They'll crave connection. I mean, Libras do anyway, but don't get all jealous because it's just going to be a small fraction. The North Node movements are suggesting that you do focus on your career. So don't just stay focused on relationships or your money. There's something about, there's a lot of promise here and personal growth, soul growth coming through where you go next in your career. So it wants you to choose more on a soul level rather than what's practical. And remember, we're going out into frontiers here. So it's about kind of getting out, or not kind of, getting out of your comfort zone big time, actually. So this whole era opening up for you is getting out of your comfort zone, trying a lot of new things. I think it'll be actually very energizing. I think you'll like it, but you will feel often like you are getting out and you are out of your typical comfort zone. But I think you'll become comfortable with new things. So let's leave it at that. Getting comfortable with new things, getting out of your comfort zone, exploring financially, your career, people, and learning how to adapt to change, especially in finances, managing your finances and relationships, how to adapt to where relationships are taking you, whatever road you're on. All right, take care, guys. Mwah.